Welcome to the How to Buy or Sell a Business Successfully podcast. The concepts discussed in this podcast are for informational purposes only. No attorney-client relationship is intended or formed by this podcast. No legal advice is intended in the substance of this podcast. Feel free to check out our website, www.goforemanlaw.com. Enjoy the show and welcome your hosts, Jake Wayman and Sam Foreman. Well, thank you all for joining us for another episode. We would like to help you buy or sell a business successfully. We're in the middle of a initial series of about 12 episodes, providing folks an overview of how deals work and covering key concepts. We just talked about how to get the most value out of your deal budget and some practical tips to do that. And today we're going to talk about how to understand the buyer's priorities. One of the things we encourage folks to do is really take time to put yourself in the shoes of the folks on the other side of the table from you, understand where they're coming at things from, understand what they value and what they don't value. My name is Sam Foreman. I'm a business attorney here in Wichita, Kansas. I love working with folks who are buying or selling business. I have two wonderful children. I've been married for 10 years. And my favorite thing about Wichita, Kansas is the people. There's a lot of things to love here. But my favorite thing is really, it's all about the people, just wonderful people who really care about their community. My co-host is Jacob Wayman.
Yeah, I'm Jake Wayman. My wife and I are the owners of Orange Theory Fitness here in Wichita, and we have two boys. I've been married for a little over 3 years, and you know what? What is one thing that I like about Wichita? I love the ability, if you want to get involved, you can do it quickly, and you can make an impact quickly in this community. That's what I love about Wichita.
No, that's terrific. That's great. Today we want to talk about understanding the buyer's priorities. We're going to talk about a couple of things here. We're going to talk about what kind of buyer you're dealing with and how that can influence their priorities. We want to talk about things they value, talk about things that create risk for a buyer, and then talk about some practical tips here at the end. So there's all different kinds of buyers, but real broadly speaking, I'd say I break it up into three categories. There's the financial buyer. So a lot of times that's a private equity firm or somebody else who's buying it based solely on financial performance. That's really how they're valuing the deal. That's how they're thinking about it is, what is the money that this is going to make for me? A different kind of buyer is a strategic buyer. And a strategic buyer, of course, could also be a private equity firm. Yep. Could be, any number of other things. But the strategic buyer is really thinking about, how do I bolt this onto my business? How does this, asset, this, core competency, this set of relationships, how does this create even more value than just the financial performance of this business? And then I think lastly is kind of the lifestyle buyer. Every now and then you find somebody who's there just, they just want to have the business for whatever reason. It's more about the lifestyle it creates for them than it is necessarily even the financial performance. Even though that's of course still going to be important.
Well, and I think for my wife and I, we started out as lifestyle buyers, and then we've kind of moved through being strategic to financial. I think you can be all three at some point in time. I mean, because you as a lifestyle buyer, you want to be able to purchase a business that you're able is going to create financial wealth for you, and you want to be strategic about it because if it needs to align with your strengths as a person, you're going to be able to run it. So I think you can play at all those, but I would put my wife and I in the lifestyle when we first purchased Orange Theory. Yeah.
No, that's terrific. Next, I want to talk about some of the things that create value that drive value in terms of buyers' priorities traditionally. And one key is we're talking through all of these topics is remember, these are just generalities, of course. It's really important to create that relationship with, the buyer that you're doing the deal with, and make sure that you understand what their unique, priorities are in the deal, because they're all going to vary, but these I think are some helpful starting place to create some context.
Well, I think going back to is that relationship, and there's that relationship between the buyer and seller, and as a seller, you'll learn to know what their priorities are by having those conversations with them, and be able to gain if it's this over that.
One of the key things, of course, is financial performance. If the dollars don't make sense on the deal probably doesn't make sense really for any of these buyers, or at least it may not. And so making sure that you understand, if you're on the sell side, what is it that's going to drive the necessary financial performance so you can help, make the deal or break the deal as quickly as possible.
Well, and something too, as from a buyer standpoint, or even the seller, like if you also start from the seller side, is you need to know what your industry multiples are. So, in certain industries, it could be typical that the companies sell for 3 to 5x of EBITDA, and knowing that, and it's like you look at your own business and say, hey, am I performing in that spectrum? Is a buyer going to want to pay the price that I want to put it out there for? Is it worth what I'm trying to sell it for?
Yeah, no, and make sure that you have a sense of what kind of, if you're on the sell side, what kind of buyer you're dealing with and what their purpose is.
Yeah.
Because that can change what those multiples might look
absolutely.
like.
100%. I think it's, you going back to your first point, is understanding the kind of buyer that you're dealing with is going to determine probably what the purchase price is going to be. So maybe somebody may pay a extremely high multiple on the higher end because it's a strategic buy for them. It's something they like the financial performance of it. So it changes it all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Other things that drive value, customer relationships, and how transferable are those customer relationships? Talk to me a little bit about what that was like for you and when you were on the buy side and how you looked at customer relationships.
Yeah, because like with Orange Theory Fitness, we're membership based. That's how we make our money is through our membership dues. And so, we needed to make sure that we were going to take care of our members, our customers, almost from day one, because it wasn't like we had to go acquire. We had to acquire new members, but there was the members that were there, our customers that were there, and those relationships needed to be delicate. They were delicate. We needed to handle them properly. And so a lot of it was, we wanted to show our members and our customers that we care about the brand. We're going to take care of this brand. We're going to take care of you. Right. And don't discount that because your current customers are your only revenue source to start with. Yeah. And you got to take care of that.
Yeah. No, that's terrific. And really understanding how those customer relationships create value and how they're going to be continued.
Yep.
Depending on the deal structure, depending on the nature of the customer, you could have some that are just completely at will, completely terminable anytime, where the only thing that's going to protect you is the relationship. And you could have others where it's like, well, they're locked in, they can't walk away, and all they care about is that we're able to continue to do these three things.
Also in customers, also the employee relationships too. Yeah. Are you going to be able to get along with and be able to manage the employees that are there? And the key stakeholders that plays in, because that will drive a lot of the customer relationships too. If the employees aren't happy, then that can change a lot of different things.
Yeah, no, and that goes back to something we talked about a couple episodes ago in terms of due diligence and really making sure that you understand how the business creates value, how it creates the value that you're interested in on the buy side, and then how to capture that value in the deal process. Same concept applies to supplier relationships. Sometimes you're in an industry where if you don't, retain the supplier relationship, you just go out and you plug in a new one. But understanding, how do those key supplier relationships fit in with creating the value you're trying to capture, and which ones you just got to retain, and which are the ones where, hey, this may be a lower priority, and we can just, go out and, instead of buying from Walmart, we'll buy from Target. Yeah. Whatever that might be.
That's like, we were very fortunate as our supplier relationships were like that, was just going and getting supplies from Target, Amazon, whatever. But it wasn't like manufacturing where it's like very strategic on the supplier relationships that you have. Right.
Understanding the importance of intellectual property, I think is another one for folks to be tracking with. It might be the value of the brand, which might be, have a lot of continuity for it. It could be, something as hard to pin down as, well, we've got a key employee who really knows how to work this machine, and this machine, prints gold when this employee's here, and every other time it prints not gold. And so understanding what that is, whether it's a process, whether it's, registered IP, whether it's a brand, or whether it's something like a trade secret or otherwise, figuring out where that fits and then how to protect that.
Well, as a buyer, like a lot of this should be coming up in the due diligence process, so you can build your priority list when you're doing that due diligence.
Absolutely. Next, let's talk about risk. Here's some risks that can fit into a buyer's priorities and how they view the deal. One, and we're certainly very versed in this now, given the current state of the economy, is market risk.
Yeah.
just understanding, where are things headed? What's that trajectory? Some businesses do better in a recession. Oh wait, we're not supposed to call it that. Some businesses do worse in a recession, and some it doesn't really matter. They just kind of do great, or they just kind of do whatever they're going to do independent of that. But understand how that fits in, and understand where that things are going, so that you can try to anticipate what that means for value for the buyer on the deal, whether you are the buyer or whether you're dealing with the buyer.
Yep.
Yep. Another one is, talking about known liabilities. What was that process like for you when you were looking at, whether it was known or unknown liabilities when you were looking at, your purchase?
Yeah, I mean, and that's where it comes into asking a lot of questions and uncovering things that are known liabilities. I mean, I covered ours. What I would say would consider a liability is, the contractual relationship on a lease. That's something that we had to inherit through the process. Right. That's a liability that we had to go with, eyes wide open and say, this is what we're inheriting through that process. What's out there. And I think it's, that's where having that good relationship between the buyer and the seller and being able to have those open and honest conversations, because, the seller wants to make the sell, the buyer wants to make the buy, everybody wants to get it done. So why hide anything?
Right. Yeah, no. And I think that brings up a really good point. When folks are looking at deals, there's a tendency, if they haven't done very many deals before, to feel very protective of information.
Yeah.
And there's some information that's very important to protect, and to really, safely guard. But there's a lot of stuff where the mindset matters. You're putting something together.
Yeah.
And the best way to put it together is with great relationships. Typically, great transparency is a critical thing. Once you've shared something, you can't unshare it.
Yeah.
So be careful with that. But make sure you've got a good team who's going to help you build that trust, and understand what are the things that you need to be thinking about. But as a general rule, especially on the sell side, we tell folks disclose. You want to be able to point to an email that says, "Hey, here's where I told you about this," rather than have somebody wonder why they didn't
buyer,
know.
you can ask questions, and the answer could be no, but at least ask the question.
Yeah, because you need to know those answers, because you got to step into into the business and make it work for you.
Yeah.
Understand talent loss. How many people are there because the current seller is there, or the owner of the seller, or key officers who might not stick around, and what is that going to mean to turnover on your team, and how do you understand that?
Yep.
Think about integration problems. When you close the deal, for some folks, you've got to integrate that deal into. For some buyers, they've got to integrate that deal into their broader operations.
Yeah.
And so, how does that play in for them?
Yeah.
If you're on a bunch of legacy software systems, for example, those got to be converted.
Well,
over.
I think we talked about this before. It's like the post sale. Once the sale's done, it's not, okay, yay, we're done, and we stop. I mean, it's now the real work starts.
Yes.
And so, that's that integration is all of that process. I mean, for me, we're a franchise, so it was understanding all the franchise information, the technology, the tools, everything, the communication, what the franchise needs. But then it was also the integration of how do we integrate into this culture that already exists.
Right. No, absolutely. Understand contractual rights. Another thing that can create risk is contractual rights. Could also create value, but understand what those are, and understand what third-party rights are. And third-party rights can take any number of different forms. It could be a termination right that they have on a contract. It could be that they own some critical piece of intellectual property that is necessary for the business to create value, and it's not something with a long-term assignable license, for example. So. Take time to understand those. Put yourself in the shoes, if you're on the sell side, in the shoes of the buyer, and understand how they're going to view some of those things from a risk perspective. So now that we've kind of talked about different kinds of buyers, value creators, and risk creators, let's talk about some practical tips to help folks through the deal process. I think a key one is and I know we talk about relationships a lot on this, but deals are relationships. Is take the time to build a relationship early. More trust, more transparency typically leads to better results. Be clear about your interests and priorities. I mean, to the point you just made a few minutes ago, we're not trying to hide anything here. Get everything that you think is important on the table early, so that if there's not a deal there, you save everybody's time and money.
Yep.
Or if it's, because most things can be worked around. Almost all things, there's a solution for it. Might not be a solution that people really want to take, which could kill the deal. But if it's out there in the open early, it gives people more time under less pressure to create more workable solutions to address it. Be clear about your interests and priorities, and ask for the same from the other party. I mean, that kind of goes hand in hand with the transparency, but, just be clear about what you want. Hey, this is important to me. This is what I want. Mm-hmm. Always be thinking if you're putting yourself at a strategic disadvantage when you do that. But if you're working with somebody that you trust on the other side of the table and you're doing a good deal, telling people what you want and what you value is important. And, even if you think there's some disadvantage to disclosing that information, usually people know anyway.
Yeah.
You're not hiding something from them that they don't know. You're just making it more difficult sometimes to get where you want to go. So, think about the buyer as a customer. If you're the seller, think about the buyer as a customer, because they are. You're just selling one product. It's your business. Yeah. Happy buyer, happy wire. Get key risks on the table quickly, and build a lot of trust in the process. Build trust in how you handle things. Mm-hmm. So, any other tips to add to that, Jake?
No, I think it kind of goes back to, regardless of the kind of buyer that you are, I mean, there's a lot of things that you need to take in consideration. If you're a lifestyle buyer, don't just think, oh man, I really, really want this business, so I'm just gonna, take it at face value and do these different things. No, there's a lot of priorities you need to keep in mind between doing that, because there's a lot of risk that you're putting into that. So just because it looks like a great business on the outside doesn't mean make it a great business on the inside. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. Well, thank you folks for joining us today as we talk about understanding the buyer's priorities. In particular as it relates to value and risk, and then some practical tips. Jacob, what's your number one thought for folks to take away from today? I thought that was my thought earlier about the whole. That was my thought. That is your thought. That was my thought. Go back 10 seconds. And that's my thought. There you go. No, that's terrific. That's terrific. I think my number one thought to tack onto that is happy buyer, happy wire. If you're on the sell side, make sure you take time to understand what it is that your buyer wants, and then go figure out how to deliver it as excellently as you can in the process. Just like you would for any other customer. And if you're the buyer, be a collaborative partner in that process. Help the seller understand what it is that you want, because you're creating mutual value in the process. Yeah. I think one of my wellness tips for doing deals, particularly as it relates to all of this, is build trust. When you're building trust with folks in the process, and those really great relationships, that can help folks really have a much better experience, a much better outcome. It really lowers the stress on deals, because you're not constantly thinking about, what do I not know? What do I not understand? How is this person trying to take advantage of me? It just creates a much better process for people. Yep. Well, thanks for joining us today, folks. We appreciate your time. Hope this is something that you're enjoying as much as we are. Please join us next time as we address the question of what are the seller's priorities. Thank you for joining us today. For future episodes, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And please check out our website at www.goforemanlaw.com/learning.